Let's get into Brush Street Beat presented by our friends at McLaren. Today's guest is Fox Sports Detroit Tigers play-by-play announcer Matt Shepard. Matt, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
You bet, Daniella. Good to be with you. How are you guys?
Doing well. A bit of a bummer that you're not down at the ballpark today for a Tigers game. As we know, the series with St. Louis has been postponed. Before we get into a little bit of that, Matt, what is your thought on the Tigers leading up to this postponement?
Well, I think they've been playing some really good baseball. Look, they just got done with a series against Cincinnati. The Reds won 2 of the 3, but Cincinnati has 3 outstanding pitchers. They've got 3 all-star pitchers. And Detroit split the season series with the Reds. Now, I know it's early, but this is a Cincinnati team that many feel, if they don't win, can at least challenge for the NL Central, and that's a good division, because you've got the Cardinals, you've got the Cubs, you got the Brewers in there as well as the Reds, and not many people think much about the Pirates right now. But they've got some really solid players. I mean, you're talking Luis Castillo, anybody would take on their team, Danielle. Trevor Bauer, anybody would take on their team. Sonny Gray, anybody would take on their team. Nick Castellanos, one of the better hitters in the National League. We're well aware of how good he is here in Detroit from an offensive standpoint. Mike Moustakas, very good player, right? They've got Shogo Akiyama, who's a really exciting left fielder. They've got some players, Eugenio Suarez last year, 49 homers, second only to Pete Alonso. You split with that team, that's a pretty good job on what Detroit did. And you look at it from a standpoint, they beat Luis Castillo. Now, I know he didn't take the loss, but the 2 games he started, they beat them twice. So there's a lot of things on which to build for Detroit. I think their bullpen's been very good so far this season. Little tough right now on the starting pitching. And I think, obviously, they've relied on the home run ball a little bit too much. You'd like to see the runners in scoring position go up. But there's a lot of positives out of Detroit so far.
Matt, to piggyback on what you were saying, certainly, I tell, all the fans that are, oh, what about the Tigers? If your biggest problem right now with starting pitching may be Matt Boyd, then is that really that much of an issue? Because Matt Boyd strikes me, at least, and I know you know him better than I do, as a guy that's going to figure it out. I mean, he's really cognizant of his entire surroundings.
Yeah, I think he will figure it out. You're right, Art. But the problem is you're only going to get about 11 or 12 starts. So then you got to ask yourself a little bit, as my dog opens the door, are you really going to be able to figure it out in a decent enough time? Look,
looks
Spencer
like it's
Turnbull,
lunchtime.
It is lunchtime. There's a lot of folks in the background. Sorry about that. My dog just decides to get up on her own whenever she wants and say, I'm going to get out of the door. But look, you got Spencer Turnbull, who's done a nice job. I wouldn't say that starting pitching, if that's your least concern and Matthew Boyd is the biggest problem, then you're going to be okay. That is not the situation. Right now, they're searching for a 4th starter. They do not have a 5th starter. And 2/3 of your first 3 guys as starters have not been all that great in Matthew Boyd and Ivan Nova. Nova's been okay, but he's, remember, more of a back-end rotation guy. So you're looking at Boyd, Turnbull. There's been a void for your number 3 starter, then Nova, and then your 5th starter, Michael Fulmer, a Daniel Norris type situation, a Michael Fulmer and Tyler Alexander situation. That's not what you want. You don't, Ron Gardenhire said it the other day, you do not want back-to-back openers, and that's what Detroit's had to deal with so far.
Well, if I may ask a quick follow-up question, Daniella, to that, and I am not trying to cause trouble or be a bit of an agitator here, but perhaps they do have maybe a 4th or 5th starter who is now still on the taxi squad in Toledo. What are we ever going to see Casey Mize?
Yes. You're going to see him. You will probably see him toward the middle part, the end of this month, unless something drastically changes. So yeah, you're going to see him. He will make his Tigers debut this year. It's just not as soon as everybody wants it to be. Eventually, it will happen. I thought it might have been by now, because of the situation that Detroit's dealing with. Michael Fulmer limited to 3 innings to start. Daniel Norris started on the COVID list and didn't get to summer camp until later. The injury to Jordan Zimmerman, the lack of starting pitching prospects, if you will, although Tyler Alexander could make a case for such. Yeah, I thought you might see him by now, but I do believe you'll see him sometime this month.
Shep, let's take a look at this week. As mentioned at the beginning of this interview, the series with St. Louis has been postponed. So the Tigers are hosting some team workouts at the ballpark this week, and the next game will be on Friday. Do you see these days off, so to speak, or non-game days as something that will be beneficial to the Tigers?
No, I don't. I don't think it's beneficial to any team, Daniella, quite honestly. You start up in spring training down in Lakeland, and Detroit felt pretty good about the way some of those guys were playing. Then you hit a roadblock, and then you're out for 3.5 months hoping guys are training on their own, and the Tigers did a really good job of that. Then you come back and you get summer camp for a few weeks, right? So you're starting to get the juices flowing a little bit. Haven't been able to play against opposing teams. You're just playing inter-squad games. Then you get the season going, and then it gets shut down after 10 games for you. Other teams, it was even shorter. Miami, for example. I think that puts everybody in a really tough spot. So I think they would have liked to keep playing. This layoff doesn't help somebody like a Jordan Zimmerman, as we were just talking about starting pitching. It might help a guy like Cameron Maybin, who went on the 10-day IL. But overall, no, I don't think it helps Detroit at all. I think they wanted to keep playing.
The additions, we talked about the veteran leadership. Obviously, Austin Romine has been a fine behind the plate. I think he's really calmed down this pitching staff. But CJ Cron and Jonathan Scope, they've hit for power, 5 home runs between them. But I think one thing that is lost maybe in this 5-5 start is how good defensively the Tigers have been.
Yeah.
And really, Cron and Scope are part of it, and I'm not taking away Candelario. I know he's half struggling at the plate. He's been good, and Nico Goodrum has been good at short. I mean, that infield is pretty tight right now, which is something the Tigers really definitely need.
I agree with you 100%. Those guys have been so big for this team early on, and it does make you wonder moving forward a little bit because all are on 1-year deals, right? And I bet you most Tiger fans would love to see them sign at least one more 1-year deal. The way Romine has handled the pitching staff, and I know the starters haven't been great, but the confidence that he's exuded. CJ Cron, when we talked earlier, guys, I told you he was a +5 defensive run saved last year. I knew he was going to be better. Jonathan Scope surprised me a little bit. He's been very steady at second base, and I know he hasn't had a ton of chances. CJ Cron has more putouts than any other American League or any first baseman in baseball. I think Jonathan Scope's somewhere around 5th in assists. But they've been very steady, very calm, been a great influence on everybody on that team. And it's not just the position players, right? I mean, they've really helped some of the pitchers. A lot of the relief pitchers talk about how those guys have really helped them. So, I'm not one of those guys who believes this is a young baseball team. A lot of people feel that. Kristen Stewart may be young to a certain extent. There might be some other folks who don't have that major league experience under their belt, Jamer Candelario, Nico Goodrum, Jacoby Jones, but they're older players, right? And we're not talking about a bunch of guys who just played in AAA a year ago. So what these 4 position players, and then Ivan Nova as an established pitcher, what they've done is they've really helped everybody not get too high and not get too low during games when they're either leading or trailing. So it's been refreshing. I think it's pretty evident just how important those free agent signings have been for Al Avila.
Shep, you talked about the struggles with the starting pitching earlier, but what about Tyler Alexander? Let's talk about him for a minute. He set an MLB record on Sunday for consecutive strikeouts by a reliever with 9. Was this an anomaly, or is Tyler Alexander really this good?
Well, I think he's this good. I don't know if he's Major League Baseball record good, right? But I do believe he's very good. He's a strike thrower. I think the thing that surprises me most, Danielle, about that situation is he's not necessarily known as a strikeout pitcher. Okay, he doesn't overpower you, which goes to show you that you don't have to have 98, 99 mile an hour gas just to strike guys out. Tyler Alexander was striking out some good baseball players the other day, striking out Nick Castellanos, striking out Suarez, striking out Moustakas. those are some guys who can flat out hit. So for him to do that was really impressive. But he's always wanted to be a starter. He would like to start again. He's made a bid for that because of what he did the other day. But he's always been a very efficient pitcher too. He doesn't walk a lot of batters. I find him being more of a pitch to contact type pitcher. But yeah, he's a guy who's definitely should be in the mix for Ron Gardenhire until Casey Mize gets to Detroit, who will immediately be inserted into the starting rotation.
Speaking of people that bring the heat, and we talked about Tyler Alexander, a lefty. There's another lefty in the bullpen. If he can keep his walks down, Gregory Soto, who has been lights out. I mean, 8 strikeouts and 5 2/3 innings, I think, and only 1 base on balls. Yeah. Do you think he's turned a corner, Matt? I mean, that he's figuring it out.
Yeah, I think he's only given up 1 hit as well, Art. So what you're looking at right now is, and I think Gregory Soto is a closer in the making. I'm not saying he will be the Tigers closer because Joe Jimenez has that job. I don't know what the future plans lie for Joe Jimenez, but I think Gregory Soto has that kind of stuff. All right, he's got strikeout stuff, which oftentimes you need in a closer. You think about it this way. If Detroit sets up their bullpen with a Soto/Cisnero, depending on the situation, 7th inning, then Buck Farmer, who's been unbelievable. I mean, I think it's 16 straight innings with no runs scored. And then Joe Jimenez, you're in a really good place right there if you're the Tigers. You're right. I'm glad you brought him up because he has really grown. He's matured an awful lot. He doesn't have that high leg kick like he's had in the past. Rick Anderson's worked with him on more. It's almost like a slide step, and it's really helped him be around the plate, and he can just overpower you, right? I mean, you get him from the left side, Jose Cisnero, who brings similar type heat from the right side. You've got yourself a pretty darn good combination.
Great perspective, Shep. Again, thank you. And a big thank you to McLaren for presenting Brush Street Beat right here on the Word on Woodward.